That is not something you want to see when you're out riding your motorbike. If you tried replacing the thermostat, the coolant temperature sensor, and the radiator cap, and none of it's worked, you're going to want to replace the head gasket. It's the last thing you want to replace. Nobody wants to replace it. It's the hardest part. Could be a blocked radiator. Most likely, if you've replaced everything else, it's going to be the head gasket. Now, the worst part about working on a scooter is the panels. You know, you've got a panel covering this, a panel covering that. It really is a pain, but it's worth it. When you're working on this, you want to remove the seat just for ease of access. You know, it just gets in the way. You don't want the seat on there. I don't want the seat on there. So let's get rid of the seat. You know, you got the two 12 mil. I think it was 12 mil bolts holding that on. And then there's a wire as well that connects the light under the seat, which you want to disconnect that as well. And the panels, you want to take all the rear panels off apart from the big silver panel, because that's the hardest part. And this panel that goes across, this is just if you want to check your coolant system, just in case it's leaking. You can check your hoses, you can get to everything, you can drain it. It's just a lot easier. You are going to want the 10 mil, the screwdriver, and you want the Allen keys as well. This is a really good time to check your airbox, because if you have high oil consumption, it could be your breather hose that's connected into the airbox. So if it is the breather hose, you can open up your airbox and you'll see the oil inside the airbox. So if you do have a high oil consumption, check the airbox, because it's not always piston rings. For me, it was piston rings and I had to replace them. You want to check that. Now you want to start removing the carb. There's the fuel line. You want to be careful when you take that off. And when you take it off, don't turn the bike on, because it will spill everywhere. Do not ask me how I know that. Just be careful. There's two wires on the right hand side of the bike. There's a 2-pin red connector, and then there's a grey, I think it's a 3-pin connector. It's a little bit tricky to undo. You want to undo that. That just means you can move the carb away from the engine, so it's easier to take apart, just so it's not in the way. Now we're gonna take the cylinder head cover off. I have a 11 mil bolt and 2 Allen keys. Now my 11 mil bolt, yours would most likely be 10 mil, but mine, I've had to replace mine. So yours will be 10 mil, but mine is 11. When you're removing this cover, the gasket can get stuck on that right hand side of the bike, so you might just want to just put your hand down there and just pop it out of place. It does come out pretty easy, but sometimes it can be stuck if it's not been changed in a while. But once you get that unstuck, the whole thing comes off nice and easy. And then you've got your rocker covers underneath there, which will be taken off soon. So you want to move down to the left side of the bike now to remove this footrest. There's two 10 mil bolts holding that on. Should be quite easy to get off. And then behind that, we will be removing this airflow cover with the, I assume, air filter. These are 8 mil. I have an Allen key, hex key, and an 8 mil bolt holding that on. And then once you remove that, you have the flywheel nut, which we'll be using 22 mil socket on to turn the engine over. Now I don't know if your bike will have the white dot, but when you're getting it to top dead center, you put it on compression stroke, not exhaust stroke. And when it's on compression stroke, you should see this white dot line up level with the cylinder head, and it'll be facing forward, so the exhaust. Once you have that lined up with the exhaust and you've double checked that it's correct, you're then going to want to remove the two 10 mil bolts that are holding down the camshaft. Now once you've removed that cover, there's going to be a washer with two 10 mil bolts holding that on with tabs that you're going to want to hammer loose and just away, so you can then loosen that 10 mil bolt. Now you want to remove the rocker arms cover. There's going to be 4 10 mil bolts holding that on. 2 of them on the right hand side of the bike are going to be longer than the left hand side, so just keep that in mind. But they're going to be 4 10 mils, and then once you remove that, you can take the rocker arms off, and then you can inspect for any damage, any wear, and replace if necessary. Now we can remove the two 10 mil bolts that's holding the camshaft sprocket in place. Once you've removed that, it should come out with a washer as well. You might need to replace yours. Once you take the bolts off, you want to pull the camshaft sprocket off the camshaft and just wiggle that chain off. And once you get that off, you can take the camshaft off, inspect the gear, inspect the lobes, make sure everything's fine. So once you've inspected that and that's all fine, and you want to remove the engine bolts, So there's two 10mm on the right hand side, and then on the top of the engine you'll have a 12mm, and then if you go underneath to the exhaust side you'll have another 12mm. Then you want to remove them two and the two 10mm, and then once you've removed them 4 bolts, they can be quite a pain, especially if you haven't taken that off before, so just WD-40, let it penetrate, and it should be fine. Once you've removed them, then you want to remove the 4 head bolts, which are 12mm. Now you want to go and remove the coolant hoses from the left side of the bike. There's 2 hoses you want to remove, and then once you remove them, you want to go ahead and remove the cam chain guide. That's a 12mm bolt. And once you've removed that, you'll be able to pull the cylinder head up and off the bike. So with the cylinder head off the bike now, you want to check for any cracks, any bent valves, any leaky valves. This is when you want to check for all of that, because if you put the bike back together and there is a crack, there's a bent valve, you know, you're gonna have to do this whole process all over again, and it will just save you a lot of time. Now as you can see where I had the coolant leak going down into the piston, so I definitely have a bad head gasket. So I'm going to take that head gasket off and replace it with this nice shiny new Athena head gasket, which should hopefully fix my issue. I'll have another video coming out of me bleeding the bike and the coolant and hopefully fixing it. So now this is when you want to clean up the mating surface on the cylinder head. You know, you want to clean up all the dirt, all the grime on the cylinder head and on the engine as well. Now once you have done that, you want to put the head gasket in the right orientation, and with mine I have the gold ring facing the carb side of the bike, the upright side of the bike. And once you have the cam chain guide all put through the head gasket and then through the cylinder, then you can slide the cylinder head onto the dowel locating pins and then push the cylinder head in. Now once you've done all of that, you can now clean up the cylinder head bolts and start putting the bolts back in the bike. Now here we have the 4 bolts going back in. You want to tighten them up in a star shape pattern. Now they are tight, you want to go to the rear of the bike and you'll see I think it's an 8mm hex key. You want to undo that, and that's your timing, so you can see when it's top dead center. So now you want to go onto the other side of the bike and you want to spin the flywheel nut until you get that top mark lined up with the mark on the engine. You'll see mine's very dirty, but you can see there's the smallest arrow. You want to line the top with that. So now you know that your engine is at top dead center. Once you have that at top dead center, you want to make sure the camshaft is lined up with the white dot facing the exhaust. Once you have that all lined up, you then want to put your cam chain back on the cam chain sprocket, and then put the cam chain sprocket back on the camshaft. And then once you have that on, you can then put your rocker arms back on. Now I have had a slight problem, so my cam chain tensioner decided that it wanted to strip the threads out. So that is where this video is going to stop here. Be sure to check in for part 2 when I get my new cam chain tensioner delivered, and I'll continue this video. Peace.
Hardcore, I don't let it shut it, break it 50-50 on a dash, and I bitches wanna play me. I ain't copping, wanna fucking all these bitches gonna drop it 50.